You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, everybody, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And, of course, we're your hosts for the show. And for hopefully the last time, we're coming to you on a Sunday afternoon. As you guys know, the way our work schedules go, sometimes it's a little tough to actually make that Monday and Friday. We've actually been pretty good about Monday, though. It's the Friday show, ironically, the one that's 11 o'clock at night, that seems to be the one we can't make half the time. But, so again, hopefully this week, everything stabilizes. Of course, a lot of you guys do watch this on demand after the live stream. So for 90% of you, actually, it really doesn't matter when we go live. But for those of you guys who do come in live, who do chat with us, again, hopefully you have your notification bell clicked, along, of course, with the subscribe, and you're liking the videos, and you'll be able to find us when we do go live. So here we are, Sunday afternoon, 4 o'clock. We're here. I promise I did actually catch up on all the Bad Batches, so I haven't missed anything, unlike last week where we just reviewed episode 6, even though 6 and 7 were released. So today, we're going to catch up with episode 7, which actually, it's funny, not really most of it was in episode 6. Episode 7 didn't really, I don't know, it wasn't like there was that much, right? It was just a continuation with them trying to get out, trying to escape, trying to do all that. So, I mean, I don't know, we almost really could have winged it last week, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole standoff situation that happened towards the end of it all, and of course, there's just the weight of everything of this trying to get, it's like you said, it's a continuation of 6, so just the weight of, once again, just trying to protect Omega, trying to figure out, okay, what the heck is this whole M-Count thing, and it's, once again, I think you said it, I think on the last show, is that these episodes have almost like no skips in a way, like a music album. Like you're not skipping any of these episodes, meaning that there's no filler. All these episodes so far, we're like 8 in now, have all been super relevant, character driven, things like that, dealing with a lot of different issues, and it's been a cool ride so far.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. I mean, of course, I would say episode 8, of course, has a lot more weight, a lot more meat to it. Really, I can see now why they did release episodes 6 and 7 together, because episode 6 can stand alone on its own, and of course, it has that cliffhanger. Episode 7, not so much. I mean, I wouldn't call it a filler episode, because it wasn't released on its own. It was released in conjunction with 6, and really, episodes 6 and 7 are, you can really look at it as one giant episode, right? It's like one self-contained, well, I mean, not self-contained, really, because it does have to do with the rest of it, but I mean, it's pretty much made to be watched together. So when I went back and I watched episode 7, it's like, okay, they're pretty much spending most of the time running and trying to rendezvous. I mean, obviously, the big things, of course, were some more development between Crosshair and Hunter. Hunter is becoming a little bit more aware of, not, because at first it was like this. At first, he was really concerned about Crosshair's influence on Omega. But I think with episode 7, you're finally seeing that Crosshair, or Hunter, is now starting to see the difference in Crosshair. He's seeing that instead of Crosshair having a negative influence on Omega, it's actually the other way around. Omega's having a positive influence on Crosshair. And this is the first time that you actually see Hunter acknowledging that, where he's seeing that, where he's seeing the positive changes. So you can see that there's a little bit more trust building. Of course, that ending scene with the standoff between him and Wolf, or actually between Rex and Wolf, really, it's like, you start to see that, you're having the clones that are still following the order, still thinking that the Empire is much like the Republic and that they're standing for the right side. And yet you have Rex and his team saying, no, you know what? That's you guys have to start opening your eyes to what's going on. And so I would say that if you're just looking at 7 as a standalone, that's probably the other maybe key point that, you would want to point out from that particular episode.
Yeah, I mean, and you also see the commitment that they're starting to kind of gel back as a team again.
Right.
Crosshair. As far as like dealing with that whole it's like that one trooper that's basically the super advanced like sniper, much like himself. Him being able to lend his expertise in that and being able to still, even though he's not 100% as far as his skill set level, the fact that he's like, okay, still he's now willing to himself to help and to engage in the fight and things of that nature. So I think that's also a really good thing to see as far as this season and series concludes, because we have to also remember, like, this is a series finale too. So we're seeing, not only, unfortunately, we spent more time with Crosshair away from the team, and then now we have this such a limited time with him back together again with everyone, and we don't know how the story is going to end. I think it's one of those things that you kind of have in the back of your mind, like, man, I wish we had this sooner, because we see the growth in him, like you just said, with that Omega's had with Crosshair.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I think that because there's going to be 15 episodes this season or something like
Yeah.
that. So we're well over. I mean, well, actually, yeah, we're just a hair now over the halfway mark for this season. So that part, I think, is going to be really interesting, is what's going to happen the rest of the season. But as far as episode 7 goes, that is another good point where Crosshair engages that super trooper guy or whatever. He really is now part of the team. He's really starting to sacrifice himself. I mean, he almost was vanquished, actually, if it hadn't been for, Rex and those guys like stunning him or whatever. So yeah, there is that part too, where you're seeing a little bit of, okay, Crosshair is still formidable, but he's not quite where he was, but yet he still is sacrificing himself possibly for Omega and for the rest of the team. So yeah, that's a good point, actually. There's a lot to it there. I mean, I would also say that episode 7 probably had a lot more character development. That's a common theme, of course, for this whole season, actually, is that there's a lot more focus on the characters than the action in this season. But yet, it's so finely balanced and done that you actually don't... usually it's a situation where you either see heavy character development and maybe not so much on the action, or a lot of action and not so much on the character development. But this, I wouldn't even say it's a balance. I mean, it's like really, it's all woven together into a perfect story thread. I mean, this is actually probably one of the most perfect story lines in Star Wars that we've seen since the Lucas days.
Yeah, it's like a good mixed album. Like I said, it has no skips to it. You don't really want to, the production on it, the musicianship, everything is done just very well. Nothing is really outshining, but the things that are meant to shine do so, and the things that support it do so. And I think that's really what's making this a really solid season so far.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I think that episode 7 really continues that, and of course, pushing into episode 8, that's that's really where we get, I think, the crux of where the story is starting to move forward. Because once again, you're seeing Crosshair and Omega again. They have to stay behind on Pabu because they need to lay low, obviously, to not draw attention. Hunter and Wrecker then go on their own mission. We see Fennec Shand. I mean, there's just a lot of really cool things that are happening now in both of these storylines. And that's honestly where a lot of the weight comes in, and this episode is no exception. I mean, it's every bit as weighty, but this time on both story arcs. A lot of times you had weight on one story arc, then it would swing over to another one. This one I would actually say is equally weighty in many ways on both of them.
Yeah, I mean, dealing a lot with almost a PTSD type thing,
Yeah.
which is a very interesting concept for Star Wars, you will, and you often wonder because we kind of always looked at the clones, at least on the onset of the Clone Wars. It's like, okay, almost, I don't want to say they're mindless, but they're more or less kind of they're just expendable. They're just been expendable, you know, characters that's just like, oh, okay, well, and it's not until you really get into the Clone Wars animation do you really start to, like, okay, it's more than just Rex and Cody. It's Fives, it's Echo, it's you know, Wolf. You're getting all these other characters now that you're starting to see. And then of course now we're introduced to the Bad Batch. So now these former clone troopers have personality and they actually have feelings and they actually have um thoughts outside of like, hey, well, yeah, we're fighting this war and this is what we're born and bred to do, but what happens? This has always been the overarching thing. It's like, okay, well, what happens when there's no war for us to fight?
Mm-hmm.
What do we do? And this is the whole reason why we're created. And so then now you would think that it's like, okay, well, cool, these are really super cool clones. We'll just have them train or something like that. But who's to say that there's going to be some big I mean, this is a galactic wide war. It's not just like, oh, we're two planets are warring with each other or something like how we would have here in the US, where it's the United States versus like, you know, Russia or something like that. It's literally like planets all over the galaxy, and you have all these different stations, and it's a galactic wide war, so you have all these troops. Well, when you don't have that scale, what happens to them? And this is what the Clone Wars has really been not Clone Wars, but Bad Batch has really been showing us. It's like, man, not only are they where they had to be aged, so now they're older men. So it's like, even if there wasn't other wars, like those clones will probably be too old to fight. Maybe. I mean, we're seeing that people like Rex, who's got no hair now, and he's got a face full of gray. Yeah, he could still be formidable, but let's face it. I mean, he's up in age. So if there was another galactic war to break out, yeah, he may be able to help on the strategy side of things, but being on the front lines every day, he wouldn't be able to handle it. So they would have to find some other use either for the clones, or they would just have to like the Empire has been doing, getting rid of them. So now, and,
Well,
and I'm saying all this because now you have this, they're trying to find different ways to repurpose them. And, a lot of them are suffering from PTSD because of the growth development that they've had, and then they're also been science experiments to, hey, I wonder if we can do this with them. Let's see if we can, once again, the Empire is looking at them as just almost like machines, where we're looking at them as, no, these are actual people that you're doing stuff to, and we're seeing the effects of that through Crosshair.
yeah, well, I mean, and this is something that I think that is really important too, is that the fact is Palpatine always looked at the clones as just disposable, temporary use soldiers. I think he
Hmm.
always actually had in mind that he was going to use stormtroopers and actually just have regular loyal people that he can manipulate under that armor. Because if you look at it, it's basically been uh just this whole like passage from droid army, the clone army, to human stormtrooper army. And I think that
Hmm.
was deliberate. I don't really think for 1 second that Palpatine was just like, well, these droids aren't really working out. Maybe we should do something else. All right, the clone thing is cool. Well, the clones have their problems too. Maybe we should do something else. I think this is always his path. And it's one way that you can even neatly wrap in the sequel trilogy into this too. It's probably one of the few things they did right in this, as to where they went, okay, well, with the Final Order, now you have Sith troopers. You're going to that next level now. So I think that in a lot of ways, there's some of that. Now, in my opinion, what they should have done, if Palpatine wanted to make it to where he wouldn't have had to worry about these guys, he could have just given them all really nice pensions or whatever, and just maybe found more civilian uses for them. Or if you keep them in the military, they would have been the ideal ones to train stormtroopers, honestly. That's what I would have thought he should have done. But for some reason, I guess that didn't happen. And of course, like you said, going on to make them experiments and use them as test subjects. So he's not really utilizing people that he finds important right now. He's actually utilizing beings that he had planned to discard anyway. So if they die, who cares, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's to your point, Eric. When you say that, I think that was always part of his plans, because Palpatine is about, like, he's about planning. I mean, this guy had to figure out, like, okay, and it once again just shows the brilliance and the genius that is Palpatine. So he fashions this war essentially between the Republic and the Separatists, finds a way to assert himself to eventually, like, okay, you know what? Chancellor Valorum is not the person who should be leading. It should be me, and then I'll lay down the power, once this war is over. But I think I have the vision that's going to help us win this war. And in the background, he's already kind of working on this whole clone technology, not just for this whole makeshift war, but also for himself, because as we know now about Necromancer, like, this is all part of his plan. But it's like, okay, well, in the cloning research, yes, make these clones, that serves my immediate need. But, or however, cloning is also the wave of the future for me, for my own personal gain. So I'm getting like a 2-for-1 deal here. So he kind of fashions his clones. It's like, okay, well, once I, take over and I have these clones, and yes, they're going to be more superior to the Separatists. And then, all right, well, cool. Like you said, Eric, now that that's over with, yeah, I can get regular people just to be my service now, because now I'm over the Empire and I'm not laying down this power now that I have it. And I'm just going to make people bow to my will, because I have this whole space station that's going to keep everyone in line, that people are going to fear. And then, now I'm the ultimate weapon of the power in the galaxy. No one would dare oppose me. And now I have people who will be willing, who after a while, this is the only government that they know.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
So
in a
now
lot of
it's just,
cases, they think it's working. That's one of the things that I think a lot of people forget, is that as the audience for this, we're seeing into the dark corners of what Palpatine is doing and everything else. The average person is like, well, okay, the galaxy is stable, economy's pretty good. I mean, everything's working out, right? So to the average citizen, unless, of course, you're on one of those planets that was trying to get out and you're finding out very quickly what the Empire is really about. But if you're just one of those that is towing the line and you think everything's cool, to you, everything's great, right? So, there's really no reason to even question them at this point, because I think the average citizen isn't really seeing a lot of the atrocities, even in some of the military things. It wasn't until Crosshair started to really see what was going on behind the scenes that he started saying, maybe I'm being loyal to the wrong side, which of course was what the rest of the guys were trying to tell him the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. And and unfortunately for Crosshair, he's felt the brunt of it. Now he's suffering, and I love this episode because, we when Hunter and Wrecker had to kind of go off and complete this mission, finding Fennec Shan and getting her involved in this in their whole quest for information. Hunter tasked Omega with the assignment of, hey, try to get his hand looked at, and so now once again Omega has a purpose, and once again it serves as another bonding moment. It serves as another way for them to um explore their relationship as brother and sister, and it's really kind of becomes kind of cute in a way,
Mhm.
and
It has
he's
there's definitely like it's sort of like a next level Din and Grogu thing, there's like a
exactly.
yeah, yeah, and not to mention the fact
Or
that you bring up a good point too, because, right, they actually serve a purpose. It's not just, okay, lay low because it's too dangerous for you. It's like, no, while you're here, there's another thing that has to be done. We gotta figure
mhm.
out what's up with Crosshair's hand, because eventually it's
Yeah,
gonna
we could
become necessary.
yeah, we need him,
Mhm.
if we can get him back at least, and once again seeing how he's kind of like, well, that was close. He's like, no, that's not good enough. Either it's a miss or it's not. I mean, it's a shot or it's not. So Crosshair, he's getting his evaluation, and I kind of suspected it's like, yeah, man, there's nothing physically wrong with you.
Mhm.
Like physically, you're fine. It could be a mental thing, and
Maybe
but
maybe
one of
maybe it's a
the
broken heart.
yeah, right, exactly. But man,
Gotta watch that broken heart thing, man.
one of the funniest moments, man, I loved in this episode, and it was so rich. I laughed really from a good, healthy place.
Yeah, it's probably
Is
the
when
same thing
she
that
yeah, she was just like, he's like, well, I have an idea, but you're not gonna like it. He's like, I have an idea, but you're not gonna like it. And he says something like, he's like, am I gonna like it? And she's like, you're not gonna like it. You don't like anything. And he's just like, that's true.
yeah.
Like I thought that I love that
That
moment
was yeah, that
because
was
it was Crosshair being Crosshair and him being completely open and honest. Is like, yeah, you got a point. Like I don't like
yep.
anything, you know.
Yeah, that was definitely him being comedic relief, and, you know,
Yeah,
I mean,
man, that was
that
really
was
good.
awesome. Yeah, and that
I
was
didn't
something that
I didn't
showed
see it coming either.
no, or when she was trying to
But that's the
basically
depth
get him
in
to
a
use the
relationship, though.
yep, that's it. And again, that's one
Like,
of the things that
yep,
I'm enjoying seeing. And I remember saying this a couple episodes ago. I could actually watch an entire series based on these two.
yep. Just those two running around trying to solve or deal with certain things.
Yeah. I mean, it would be
Because
kind of cool.
they're like a brother and sister, a married couple, and like father and daughter, like all wrapped into one. Like all those different types of relationships, all wrapped into one.
Yeah, so Luke and Leia,
Um,
basically.
you got a point. um, so and that was, and like I said, I thought that was really cool. And so he's trying to figure out how to meditate, and I thought this was one of those situations where she was going to end up using the force or something like that, and Crosshair was going to see it, and he was going to put two and two together and get the M count thing. Like, oh, that's why they want her. That's what
It's
I thought was
funny.
going to be revealed.
It's funny you bring that up because, like in this shot here, when they cut to it, I thought you were going to see her like floating or something. You know? Like she's sort of like
Right.
mindlessly doing it, and then Crosshair be like, yeah. But see, they resisted that, and I'm glad that they did. Because
Yeah.
honestly, here's the thing. It's just like with the whole Fennec Shan, Hunter Wrecker thing, right? They're definitely,
Mhm.
in a lot of ways, I think that this is what that Star Wars game Outlaws is going to be like, where, it's basically an open-ended thing. You basically play like I don't know if they're going to break it up. I don't remember if they said that you're going to play as a bounty hunter or whatever. But I mean, there's definitely a character that you're playing as, but you go and you're trying to, as again, it's almost the same thing as what we saw with Sid, right? Fennec's like, well, yeah, okay, I'll
Mhm.
give you the information, but you got to do this thing first. So they go to do the thing, and then it's like, well, I don't really have it. It's almost like a Palpatine thing. Well, you know, I'll find it for you, or whatever. But the point is that you're on these series of quests with them, and that's the way that I see the Outlaw game actually being played, and that's what I think is really making good Star Wars television right now. Is you're on the journey with these characters. You don't feel like you're just watching them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very good I don't want to say tactic, but I think that's a very good plot or story device to use to make people more engaged into this world. And I think Star Wars could benefit a lot from that in a lot of different other mediums, or not mediums, but in other series or films.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's one of those things where it's like, all right, for certain things, I think you should be like the observationist, and you're just kind of just observing everything as it's happening. Then there's other times where you feel like you're right there, part of the group, part of the crew, that whole, third person in the crew, and you're just kind of like, okay, what do we do next? And you're almost like, I don't know, while you're in your seat, to have that type of relationship with the content will be really, it's always an interesting piece. But yeah, this episode too, once we, of course, we have that with Crosshair and Omega, we also have Wrecker and Hunter trying to figure out what's going on with Fennec Shand. That whole conversation kind of reminded me of Greedo and Han from A New Hope, but of course, no one had to die in that one, in that exchange. But that creature that they were chasing after, man,
I know,
he was kind of freaky.
Well, and that was the thing. At first, I remember when I first saw it, because it's weird. I had this reflection on my television at the time, so anything that was dark gets a little bit muddied out a little bit. But what was interesting was, at first I thought it was multiple creatures that were just coming out, and then I realized, oh no, that's the target they're looking for. That's the guy, and he's another one, and that's something else too, because you got to give him credit for consistently coming up with new creatures or new villains or whatever in an already crowded universe. Because if you think about it, that's really difficult to do. Star Wars is now almost 50 years old. It's coming up. It's like 45 or something. So, well, actually, no, like 40, 47. So, yeah, it's coming up on 50 years old. So, it's increasingly difficult to continue to come up with new, interesting, unique characters or whatever that you plan to introduce that isn't reminiscent of something else. And I thought that this particular target that they were going after was the same kind of deal. I'm like, wow, all right, this is, like you said, it was kind of a freaky little villain.
Yeah, I mean, and just the world's like, the planet that they landed on. Let me see if I can. I know that the target they were looking for was Siler Ceres, but yeah, the planet that they were,
which was a giant Louisiana swamp.
Basically, yeah, it looked like
with the airboat that they had.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think we've ever seen that before, and I thought that was really cool.
No.
Like that was
no, because the Dagobah swamp was more like, almost like like a South American jungle kind of swampy.
Yeah.
This is more like your Florida Everglades, or maybe something in Louisiana, like the Bayou. Exactly. That's really more what this was like. And and it was eerie, and it was kind of cool at the same time. So that's another one.
It's like Lake Placid. That's what it reminded me of.
Mm-hmm.
So,
or Anaconda.
And of course, yep. And they were basically, Phoenix was basically saying like, okay, don't get in the water. And the fact that she was like, basically like, all right, you know what? You're the munitions guy. You're the tracker. Cool. I've got the best of what I need. You guys go do it. And it was just like, All right. So now they got to hop in the water and like diffuse these like mines, which was like, all right. But of course, they got this whole, and I'm thinking like Siler is probably using them to keep people away from his location, which he probably is, but he's also trying to keep those crocodile or whatever the heck those things were, um, basically away at bay as well. So that was, some cool action. Um, even the fact that the woman that actually snatched Hunter and was almost like swallowed him whole, but then you forget that Wrecker's in the water and he's just beating the crap out of this
Oh
stupid
yeah,
thing.
that was just
Uh,
hilarious.
I mean, hilarious. He's just like slamming it all over the place.
Yeah, I was laughing at that he was just pummeling the thing.
Yeah, man, just splashing around. Wrecker's like a big kid, who doesn't know
And
his own
he
strength.
doesn't really fear anything because he knows
Nope.
he's pretty much stronger than anything, so it's you know.
And he's got his yeah, as long as he's got his armor, he's good. And he actually loves
Mhm.
to fight, and
Yeah,
that's his thing.
he was
So
kind of in his element, honestly. Diffusing bombs and
um
fighting. It's perfect.
exactly. And then but when they actually had to like try to corner Siler, that was interesting because he kind of reminded me of Reptile from Mortal Kombat.
Mhm.
Like he's blending into like the uh the roofing of that 110, and his whole kind of like fighting style was kind of very, I don't want to say ninja like, but I could definitely make some comparisons into that. Um but he was a freaky looking bug thing, man. I mean, I was like, all right, Star Wars kind of umped the ante on this one as far as the way the character looked. It was like a giant praying mantis.
Yeah,
And
that's basically what it was.
and he um he was quite formidable to even Wrecker.
Well, and that was the thing, and you couldn't stun him. It took like
Yeah,
how many attempts to do it? I mean, that
like
was
5
just
or 6 of those. Yeah.
at least. And so that was another thing that I thought was interesting too, because we're used to seeing, okay, the heroes come in, the target runs, he fights, they subdue him. I mean, that's more or less still what happened, but it was done in a very unexpected way. This was, like you said, it was that opponent was way more powerful than what you thought it would be.
Mhm. I mean, they showed him, I'm like, "Oh, these 2 will be able to handle him pretty easily. That's
Right.
nothing."
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
and you're just like, "All right, yeah, this is the problem." And now you see why Fennec was like, "Okay,
Yeah, that she
I
needed
see
some
why
help
you."
on this one. Like, well, all right, I might need some help on this. And it was cool that or he, or whatever, knew who Finnick was. That's
Mhm.
why it's always fun to see, the more famous bounty hunters, no matter what the target is, they know who these people are. And there's a certain amount of healthy respect. I mean, if there's no fear there, there's at least some respect. Like, okay, you're not just somebody that I'm just going to mow over, basically. You're somebody that I have to maybe outsmart you, or I might have to be out, able to pretty much sidestep you in some way or engage you. And so it was
Yeah.
always nice that, it was kind of nice to see Fennec being represented again. And it was funny because Ming Na Wen actually did an interview about this episode, and she was just basically going on about how this is actually one of her favorite roles that she's ever had. Like, she loves to be Fennec Shand, even if it's in
Oh, wow.
animation. Whether it's in
Hmm.
animation or live action, she absolutely loves
Yeah.
it. Absolutely loves it. So, and you can tell
Well,
just
yeah, I
by the
mean,
way she plays the character.
Fennec Shannon's always been like I said, a very cool character. Um, Even, because we all kind of grew up on Aura Singh and
Mhm.
um Esquire, one of the better female bounty hunters, but Fennec Shan has definitely proven to be, very top notch because once again, you got someone like Boba Fett who truly respects her. So she's definitely proven her merit over the time as we gotten to know her throughout the Clone Wars, and of course the Mandalorian and Book Boba Fett, and now of course Bad Batch. So yeah, I really enjoy when when she pops up, it'd be hilarious if Cad Bane ever shows up with those guys. That would be.
Well, and I mean, let's see. I mean, it definitely could happen. I wouldn't rule that out. I wouldn't rule anybody out at this point. I mean, I. So here's a question too: are they going to do? You know how in a lot of Filoni series, there's like a mid-season finale, and then I don't know, a couple of weeks later, it picks back up again or
Yeah.
something.
Do I think it's going to happen?
Well, if it does, it's got to be the next episode
Yeah.
because I
That's the.
mean, that
That's
would be
the.
episode
Basically
9.
the half.
That's over
Yeah.
the halfway point. If there's only 15 episodes this season, this would have been the one. So I'm just wondering if they're going to do a mid-season finale and then, pick it up or whatever, or if they're just going to blow straight through these. I mean, again, as another person pointed out in the comments, I don't remember if it was in the chats or in the comments. It might have been in the chats because I remember, I think we addressed it when it was live, but somebody had pointed out that they did release the full schedule of these episodes. Basically, when I was laughing about the fact that I didn't realize they had released 7 simultaneously, it's like, well, there was a schedule. Of course, it's like, yeah, but I mean, that's something that you basically glance at. You're not, I mean, I guess if I were being responsible, I would, go off of that, but who said I was responsible with this show, right? So, yeah, but if they do it, it'll be interesting to see where they do it. Like, are they going to wrap up a certain thing and then open up something else? So that's something that I wonder about too. But I really like the fact that they advanced the M count thing, and again, they're doing it like we said, where we're on the journey with them. We know what it is. They don't know what it is, and we're finding out with our characters. It's not like somebody is just, oh yeah, well that's, and then they start talking about midi-chlorians and stuff. I mean, they don't know what it is. They just know that whatever it is, Omega has it, and they need to protect her.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, I hate the fact that they didn't get any information on it. Like, at least give them something to, and it's like, man, okay, well, now we got to figure out the piece to that puzzle now. Like, but
oh yeah, you talking about it at the end too, because when she's betraying him,
yeah, she's
who's she
basically
talking to?
Well, she pulled a Palpatine on him, basically like, oh yeah, well,
Yep.
together, or well, you know what? Just trust
That's what
me,
I
I'll
said
get the
earlier.
information.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
But at first, at that
it's
communication at the end, I thought that she was asking to get the information, not like, oh, I'm gonna turn, I'm gonna turn you on these clones now. You know what I mean? It's like, I wonder
oh
what
well, I
that's all
mean,
about.
well, we know who she was talking to.
Who was she
It's
talking to?
just
I didn't see it.
oh, it's Ventress.
Okay. Because, like I said, there was that reflection on the TV, so it was obscuring some things.
Well, it just makes sense. It's not even the fact that they revealed it. I don't believe I think it's just the fact that it just makes sense because one, we got
Well, and I would say they have to bring Ventress in soon, right? We're coming up on episode 9. We
she's a
know
bounty
she's going to
hunter.
be there. She's another bounty hunter, and
She would know.
Not only that, but where I think that she's going to come in, and why I think that they're going to play her more as a hero, is because she was really hot to free, the children and help children, like force sensitive children out and all that. I remember, from the Clone Wars thing. So,
And Palpatine's the one who turned Dooku against her. So
yep. So
basically
she's
told
got a
Dooku to
beef
get rid
against
of her.
him.
So
Yep.
yep.
Yeah. So I think that they're going to set that up. Now, it's really fascinating to me because obviously, and I'm sure when she pops up, we'll probably address this a little bit more, but they're obviously ignoring that Dark Disciple novel. So it makes me wonder, are they just going to retcon the death, or are they basically going to decanonize that novel? to where none of that is, I mean, if they
That's a
do,
good.
they should rebrand it as Legends, because I mean that's a pretty big thing. You have a character that
Yeah.
dies at the end of some, you bring them back. I mean, because they can't play with the timeline because Mace Windu is in it. That thing happened. That was going to be a Clone Wars episode for season 6, which of course it wasn't. But it clearly is before episode 3, right? I mean, it's before Revenge of the Sith, so unless,
Yeah, because it's
they faked it, or I mean, I don't know. It's just going to be interesting to see if they even address that.
because on one hand, you could say because it was never aired as a Clone Wars episode, it doesn't exist. And maybe the book is just like, well, this is what we would have done. But since it didn't happen, here's just a book. You know what I mean?
Well, then they'll have to do that. Then they would have to do the same
I don't
thing
know.
with Jedi Lost.
Yeah.
That was another Clone Wars episode. In fact, that was so much so they didn't even change the form. It still
Well,
reads like a
yeah. I
television
mean,
script. At least with Dark Disciple, they actually change it into a novel.
but with Dark Disciple, I mean, well, you may be able to get away with it. I'm trying to remember some things from it because you might be able to get away with Jedi Lost because it was more so about Dooku, and he was just telling Ventress, kind of like what happened to him versus Dark Disciple, where she actually dies. You see what I'm saying? Like that's more impactful, like in the sense that
Well,
that's
but
more
I mean, there's a
finite.
lot of impactful things. You're getting the whole history behind. That would almost be like if they decided to change some of the events, say Qui-Gon and all that, and that directly contradicts Jedi Lost. I'm just saying they could do that. They haven't done it yet, but they hadn't done the whole Ventress thing until now anyway. So it's sort of like what I'm saying is that they're going to actually start to ignore those. They're going to have to do something like either reprint them with the Legends banner on them or address that somehow. Because anything that came out under that Disney Lucasfilm banner was
Deemed
canon.
Yeah.
Now, the
Yeah.
only thing is The New Dawn was the first book. I would have to actually see where exactly what release date it was, because that could have been one of those that maybe got under the wire or whatever before Disney said, okay, from now on everything's canon. I have to double check that part of it, because that was a part, like you said. But what I'm just saying is that you could use that same argument, because if you say, hey, this is an unproduced Clone Wars episode, so, technically, sure, we put it out so the fans could enjoy it, but we want to go somewhere else. I'm just saying the Jedi Lost falls into that same category.
Yeah, no,
So,
I get you.
see what I'm saying? So it's sort of like, I'm not saying they're going to, but I'm just saying they could. And that leads you to go, well, if you do that with that, then you might not want to fall too in love with any of that stuff.
And
it's just, and I mean, I get it. Because at the time that came out, I think that they figured that Asajj would serve her purpose by the end of the Clone Wars, so why not just kill her off? And now you got this whole new rebirth of, hey, we're going to make a ton of content in between episodes 3 and 4. She's just too good of a character to just let die like that.
Yeah.
You could pull a thing like, oh, wait, it's her twin sister, a Psalm or something.
Oh my goodness.
And just basically recreate the character, I mean, they could do that too, but Ventress was
her.
Well, that's another thing, because let's not forget the fact that she has hair in this.
Hair. Yeah.
There's a very real possibility that that's not actually Asajj, but a clone of her. Why not? That's like the easiest. That's actually even better than the World Between Worlds thing. You just make, oh yeah, it's a clone, and then you're good. Because I still say, look, if you could bring Maul back, and he wasn't even a clone. If you could
Right.
bring Maul back, you could do anything. I mean, nothing's off the table. I mean, I don't remember exactly how Asajj died in Dark Disciple. I remember she sacrificed herself. I remember because she fell in love with Quinlan Voss, and that was like that whole thing. And she basically sacrificed for him. But I don't remember the actual manner of death. If anybody remembers how she died, put it in the comment section. Because I don't actually remember what the circumstances were, but they can't be as bad as Maul, right? So I guess you could say, look, if you could bring back Darth Maul, then you could bring back anybody.
True. I mean, especially if you fuel enough for the dark side where you can keep yourself alive.
Well, but the thing is, she had turned light by that point.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
So, I don't know. Maybe who knows? But it will be interesting, though. I am looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to her return. I'm actually surprised it hasn't happened yet, but I can see why they would save that, to further down the line, and again, we're coming up on episode 9. I could see her maybe doing 9 and 10, but I can also see maybe they save her to toward the end of the series, because this is a series finale too. So that's another thing we got to look at, is how this whole thing is going to wrap up.
After Voss is turned to the dark side by Dooku, Ventress ultimately manages to redeem him, but she is killed by Dooku with Force lightning shortly after.
That's what it was.
Voss later returns Ventress's body to Dathomir so she may rejoin her fallen sisters in spirit.
That's what it was.
So
like a little bit of a Vader thing.
Could be a Dathomir spell or something.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, look, I mean, they can, well, that's kind of what they did with Maul, really. After they gave him his little spider legs.
Well, yeah, not only that, but I mean, that's what Thrawn was using in Ahsoka.
Yeah,
with those true. Casks. He had the Dathomir witches up there, doing his bidding. So who knows?
Yeah. Well, I mean, anything's on the table once you bring that stuff in, right? I mean, because when you look at Maul, he's the one I point to, because he's been through some things. When you actually just look at everything this poor guy has gone through, from the time of the Phantom Menace all the way to his ultimate demise against Kenobi, he's really had a rough life.
He had a rough go of things.
He did. That poor guy, you almost feel bad for him, actually, if it wasn't for the fact that he was maybe not on the right side of things, but
he just had this hatred for Kenobi.
Yeah, that's basically what was fueling him. But it was interesting, though, that they let him go as a Sith Lord, and that's what I'm wondering in the Clone Wars, as the episodes are going on, it makes me wonder exactly how much of some of this lore that you're getting from the comics, from the novels, are going to bring into this, because that seems what they're doing. I think more than anything now, they're truly unifying canon in a way they never have before. And that's one of the things that excites me, honestly, about this whole thing. Aside from the character development, too, of course.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we kind of wanted to see how they were going to piece everything together, and they're doing a great job so far. So I just hope that, for the second half of this, it just continues to be rock solid.
Well, and I mean, on that note, so obviously we didn't want to do what do you want to see next, because we were reviewing episode 7 today, and you had already seen it last week, but now that we're at the end of 8 and we're all caught up, so now what do you want to see for 9 or maybe 10?
Well, I think we just kind of talked about it. I think
Asajj Ventress, yeah.
Asajj Ventress. I think we're going to see the onset of her, and we need to figure out what her story is now, what her deal is, and how that's going, and if we're going to get any more information on that. And then if the meditation or begins to actually fix Crosshair, I would love to see if that if he comes back to like at least the second half of this thing, being the old Crosshair again and being able to pick people apart at will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that looks good. I'm hoping that, that's pretty much what it is. I think that that's really what we're going to get. I would say the only other thing that I would like to see in addition to that is maybe a little bit more on the Hemlock side of things, what's going on, in that area, what's going on Tantus. So, yeah, I mean, so far everything's been stellar. So, the question, of course, not us, it's you guys. What did you guys think of episode 7? What did you think of episode 8? Put it in the comments section. If you like this episode, hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already done so. And then hit the notification bell, especially because in a lot of cases, we have to move our live show around. We generally try to stick with Monday at 8 o'clock and Friday at 11, but as you guys have seen lately, that's moved. Now, tomorrow, as we all know, the Acolyte trailer finally dropped. It's funny, we were talking about that on a recent show. It was within the last few shows where we're talking about, we got to see something at some point with this thing if it's coming out in June. Well, now we have. So what we're going to do is we'll do a little reaction. We'll react to the trailer on tomorrow's show and talk about our thoughts. And, you guys, of course, hopefully you join us on that tomorrow at 8 or whatever time we end up doing it. I almost hesitate to give times now, because it seems like every time I do, one of us is texting like, got to move the show. So, at some point tomorrow night, probably 8, maybe 9, we'll be up there reacting to the Acolyte trailer, and we want to hear from you guys on that too. So, I think that's going to do it for this one.
Yes, sir.
All right. So with that, hopefully you guys join us tomorrow, and we'll talk about the Acolyte. And then, of course, Friday, once again, episode 9 of The Bad Batch. So you see where this is going. We're in this to the end, guys. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.